Welcome to all of you that are joining us on the call. My name is Paul Springer. I'm the lead pastor here at Northwest Baptist Church. And with us today, we have one of our members, Dr. Matt Lee, who's going to be helping walk us through some good information on the coronavirus vaccine to help us make good decisions. This call will be recorded so that others can watch it later on. So just realize that as you participate in it. A couple ground rules to lay out. We want to allow time for question and answer, but we also don't want people to forget their question. So if you have a question, you can put it out in the chat as we go along so you don't forget it. And if it's not something that Dr. Lee mentions as he goes through, we'll address them at the end. We'll have a Q&A time. And also during that Q&A time at the end, in addition to the stuff that's in the chat, if you have a question that comes up that you've been holding on to, you can use the raise hand feature to let me know that you have a question, and then you can come and actually ask your question. And you can do that on camera. You can just do that with your microphone, whatever works best for you. Even if you're just joining on an actual phone call, you can answer in that way as well. And that way we can take questions from everyone. Dr. Matt, anything else you would like me to lay out beforehand, or anything else you want people to know before we get started here?
I think that's it. I do have two. I just have a disclaimer, I guess. I'm presenting information as a, independent licensed medical professional. My views, opinions, and any errors in my presentation are mine. They don't reflect Northwest or my employer. So,
okay.
This is basically what you said before.
Oh, wonderful.
This is what I hope to cover. My intention here is just to give people information. Don't misinterpret this as me trying to influence someone to get the vaccine or not get the vaccine. As our church family, you're competent adults, make your own decisions, and I hope to give information to make those decisions. I hope to just go through a little bit about what we're doing, how COVID is today in our state, how vaccines work. I think that's just a little groundwork. It's a nice 4-minute video. It's not long, but it's really well done about how vaccines work in general. We'll talk for a brief minute about vaccine history, the history of development, review some different vaccine types that they talk about in the video, how vaccines have impacted us historically, herd immunity, what that is, then more specifically about how do mRNA vaccines work, the timeline of the development of the mRNA of the vaccines that we're mostly talking about in our state, at least, which are the Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. How well do mRNA vaccines work? Are they safe? And some question times. I'm anticipating maybe 3 to 4 hours, maybe a break and then come back. No, I think maybe 20 minutes. Maybe 20 minutes is what I'm shooting for. The great news is, and I'll start off with great, wonderful news. This is updated as of today. There's different ways you can look at the burden of disease or how much COVID-19 is out there. This is one, which is this percent positive by test. Deaths mirror this, other things mirror this, hospitalizations mirror this. So this is just one graph of many I could show. But if you look, we're at 2.8% as of yesterday, which is great, wonderful news. It's almost as low as we've been in the whole pandemic. So real positive news there. I'm just going to I thought this vaccine, I struggled with how to talk about this. I thought this video was really good. So give your attention to this for just a second.
In 1796, the scientist Edward Jenner injected material from a cowpox virus into an 8-year-old boy, with a hunch that this would provide the protection needed to save people from deadly outbreaks of the related smallpox virus. It was a success. The 8-year-old was inoculated against the disease, and this became the first ever vaccine. But why did it work? To understand how vaccines function, we need to know how the immune system defends us against contagious diseases in the first place. When foreign microbes invade us, the immune system triggers a series of responses in an attempt to identify and remove them from our bodies. The signs that this immune response is working are the coughing, sneezing, inflammation, and fever we experience. which work to trap, deter, and rid the body of threatening things like bacteria. These innate immune responses also trigger our second line of defense, called adaptive immunity. Special cells called B cells and T cells are recruited to fight microbes and also record information about them, creating a memory of what the invaders look like and how best to fight them. This know-how becomes handy if the same pathogen invades the body again. But despite this smart response, there's still a risk involved. The body takes time to learn how to respond to pathogens and to build up these defenses. And even then, if a body is too weak or young to fight back when it's invaded, it might face very serious risk if the pathogen is particularly severe. But what if we could prepare the body's immune response, readying it before someone even got ill? This is where vaccines come in. Using the same principles that the body uses to defend itself, scientists use vaccines to trigger the body's adaptive immune system without exposing humans to the full-strength disease. This has resulted in many vaccines, which each work uniquely, separated into many different types. First, we have live attenuated vaccines. These are made of the pathogen itself, but a much weaker and tamer version. Next, we have inactive vaccines, in which the pathogens have been killed. The weakening and inactivation in both types of vaccine ensures that pathogens don't develop into the full-blown disease. But just like a disease, they trigger an immune response, teaching the body to recognize an attack by making a profile of pathogens in preparation. The downside is that live attenuated vaccines can be difficult to make, and because they're live and quite powerful, people with weaker immune systems can't have them, while inactive vaccines don't create long-lasting immunity. Another type, the subunit vaccine, is only made from one part of the pathogen, called an antigen, the ingredient that actually triggers the immune response. By even further isolating specific components of antigens, like proteins or polysaccharides, these vaccines can prompt specific responses. Scientists are now building a whole new range of vaccines called DNA vaccines. For this variety, they isolate the very genes that make the specific antigens the body needs to trigger its immune response to specific pathogens. When injected into the human body, those genes instruct cells in the body to make the antigens. This causes a stronger immune response and prepares the body for any future threats. And because the vaccine only includes specific genetic material, it doesn't contain any other ingredients from the rest of the pathogen that could develop into the disease and harm the patient. If these vaccines become a success, we might be able to build more effective treatments for invasive pathogens in years to come. Just like Edward Jenner's amazing discovery spurred on modern medicine all those decades ago, continuing the development of vaccines might even allow us to treat diseases like HIV, malaria, or Ebola one day.
Very interesting. I think you saw many of the pathogens or the microbes that they were showing looked a lot like coronavirus, and they talked about DNA viruses. Also, we could call RNA vaccines or RNA vaccines. This video was made 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now, when coronavirus wasn't a concern. And that's just to point out how long DNA vaccines have been on the horizon and been ready. I just want to go through quickly some development of the vaccines period. If you just look throughout our history, we've been continually developing vaccines to fight all types of terrible diseases. Diphtheria, tuberculosis, yellow fever, rabies, meningitis, chickenpox, hepatitis A, pertussis, things that have killed many, many people. This is just a reminder of what they said in the video about the different types of vaccines. And you see the genetic complexity and replication potential, meaning all the way to the right on your screen are the live viruses like polio, smallpox. Again, they're a live virus. And so people are susceptible to being ill. There's the live attenuated, still has a significant portion of the virus active. And then you keep going back until you see just the proteins or the gene-based, where they're just making the proteins. There is no virus in those. And that is a huge step forward. And there's no real risk for infection since it's just the outer coat. Again, just to remind us, I don't think we need reminding that prior to vaccines, millions of people died from things like smallpox, measles, mumps, tetanus. And when you look at a disease like diphtheria that killed millions of people, and this is the latest data from something I pulled, there were 2 cases in 2002. So that's just a quick, how does the immune system work? How do vaccines, how have they impacted us as a human species? We're going to move on to what is herd immunity. You've heard, and people have been talking about herd immunity. Of course, we have to have one cow joke since we live in Wisconsin. It says, shouldn't you be wearing a mask? No, we're protected by herd immunity. Not a bad picture, actually. If you see that top line, you see in the center a person who has the virus, and now they can infect someone else who can infect someone else who can infect someone else, and it spreads very quickly. In the middle portion, the more immunity we have, the less contagion comes into contact with people. So even though someone has it and passes it on, they may not pass it on to the next person. And then I'm protected because I'm protected here. I'm protected here because this person doesn't get it. And then eventually we surround people. So if someone does have it, we can't eradicate it completely. There's no ability to spread. So this person is protected because everyone around them is immune. That's the idea of herd immunity. Here's some estimates. These are just estimates. I should have said at the very, very beginning of this, we have to approach, I think, all science and knowledge with humility, and certainly about something that we're learning about rapidly. So I do like the word estimate here. These are estimates, because we don't really understand completely how many people have been infected. We test a lot of people, but we don't know how many people have been infected. But we do know that those who have been infected have some level of immunity for some time. It wanes over time, though. Now, as we get vaccinated, the combination of people who've had it versus who's been vaccinated, we can get to close to that 70%, which is what we would think we would need to have that protection by herd immunity. So this graph here shows us getting to 70% by, summer. Some others have us getting there by October. A lot of it depends on the estimates in the current infection in the population, which again, we have to be humble about that we don't quite understand. How do messenger or mRNA vaccines work? I think that's been a topic for a lot of people trying to understand. This is a new technology. Well, sometimes slides just slip in my presentation and I don't know how it happens. So I apologize for that. A little cute baby. Here we go. Going back to a review of basic biology. What is DNA? DNA are the blueprints. DNA are the blueprints that are inside of our nucleus of the cell. So if you see in this picture, here's the nucleus of the cell. Here are the blueprints of the genetic information for us. The way that they get outside of the cell and translate into protein is first they are what's called transcribed. It sounds just like it's written down, copied. A small portion that is important is sent out from the nucleus, messenger RNA. This is a piece of genetic material that is specific for a protein, and that's why it's called a messenger. It goes out of the nucleus, and it goes to one of our protein-making factories called ribosomes. But the protein-making factory is outside the nucleus. Now, this code, this small portion of the blueprint, is now translated into a protein by linking together amino acids. We end up with a protein. Those proteins end up in some type of trait for us, either a type makes our blood cells, it makes our hair cells, it makes our tissue, it makes everything else. So what we're really talking about is this mRNA piece here. So how does especially the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine work? Here is mRNA. So the mRNA is made. The mRNA is made in order to encode for this specific, what's called spike protein. Now, we say spike protein, there are multiple proteins that make this up. This is not a singular entity. There are multiple proteins that make this up and multiple strands of messenger RNA that do this. So the messenger RNA is made, it's enclosed in a lipid nanoparticle so that it can traverse and be stable and get into the cell. But it is somewhat fragile. This is why, especially these messenger mRNA vaccines, have to be stored at very cold temperatures, can't be handled a lot, have to be given right when they're thawed. There's a lot of issues around giving them, but they can be handled well, but they are not a hardy vaccine, and they have to be frozen and handled correctly. But once these mRNA particles get into the cell, they don't go into the nucleus. mRNA don't live there. They go to the protein factories, the ribosomes, and now they make, through a series of amino acids together, they make this protein. So the good news is you have this protein, which then elicits or begins to stimulate this immune response of antibodies and T cells, like the opening video talked about, without having the virus have to be in you. There is no virus. It is just this protein part that we have sent the signal in, and now your own body is making the protein. Some people wonder about how fast this vaccine got developed and are concerned. You know, sometimes fast work is sloppy work, and I'm just going to explain that a little bit. I do think my point of view here is that it wasn't sloppy, and that it was fast forwarded for various reasons in a smart way. How did we get here so fast? First of all, when you look at the development of things like polio vaccine, typhoid vaccine, yellow fever, even more recently, hepatitis B vaccine, many years in development and testing before it was rolled out. And, you know, we tend to think sometimes, well, that's the way it's got to be. That's right. Well, maybe and maybe not. Part of the reason that our coronavirus vaccine came to fruition so quickly, and you see how short the timeline was, it was a concerted worldwide effort. So this has been going on every continent in the planet since we figured out there was coronavirus in the world. As I mentioned before, the mRNA technology already existed. So this was already in trials for they were already trialing mRNA vaccine technology for things like flu vaccines and others, because we can make it rather quickly, and it is very specific. When we do move to the trial phase, let's say we go to try to develop a vaccine for yellow fever. Well, thankfully, yellow fever is not worldwide. We're not in a worldwide pandemic, so it's hard to find people who have yellow fever to enroll in trials. You know, it wasn't hard to find people who had coronavirus. Everybody had coronavirus. That was everywhere, in every community, in every state, in every demographic. So the enrolling people in trials, you know, I don't know, but would take weeks, not months or years, to get an outcome. This is just a slide to give you the traditional vaccine development pathway. If you look at, figuring it out preclinically, how are we going to manufacture it? And there's also in this, hey, from a drug company point of view, am I going to make money from it? Is it going to pay off? Am I going to invest a lot of money? I can't invest the whole company in it. It may not work. So you get this years and years and years of a pathway. Well, we didn't have time for that, obviously. Here's another way to look at it. Here's the traditional way that vaccines are developed. Let's figure out a disease. Let's figure out if we can do it. We'll do a small clinical trial. We've got different phases. Maybe it's efficacious. Is it safe? We won't really start ramping up manufacturing large scale until we're really sure we've got licensing and all of these things. Well, if we wait there, this is years down the line. So this is a way to shorten the vaccine development period, and this is what was done with the vaccine development all over the world, not just here in the United States. We know we want to go after, once we identify anything that works well, we're going to start manufacturing it right away. Now, again, many companies would not do this because of the commercial risk. Our society, through our government, said, we're not going to let you take that risk. We're going to pay you for any vaccine, whether it works or not. Go ahead and develop it. If it works, great, we'll use it. If it doesn't, we won't use it. And so that we can have large scale manufacturing as soon as we know that it's safe and it's working and we have large amounts to give. Here's an example from the New England Journal in May of 2020. There were a lot of vaccines under development. These were all in the pipeline at the same time, okay? And many of them, you'll notice, aren't in the news. You haven't heard of them because they didn't work. They're not ready for prime time. They are not ready. And so it's not that all vaccines were a vaccine or two was just rushed to the market. There was a process. Many of them aren't making it, and so they're not being developed. The ones that are, the Moderna, the BioNTech, the RNA, are making it. They've shown to be safe and effective, and they've already had large scale manufacturing. How well do mRNA vaccines work? Instead of going through every mRNA vaccine on the market, we're just going to focus on the BioNTech vaccine. This was from, the data in the New England Journal of Medicine. They took about 20 or so thousand people in each arm, but in each side of the trial, those that they gave a placebo or no vaccine to, and those that they gave the vaccine to. Then they tracked these people to see who got coronavirus over time. So the blue are the cases of people who got coronavirus who got no vaccine or a fake vaccine. And the red are the people who got coronavirus infection who had taken the vaccine. This is a little inset for the first 21 days. So they got vaccinated or got the placebo on day 0. The disease rates are about the same until you reach about day 10, 11. Then you see they start changing very rapidly. So there's a big difference. People without the vaccine keep getting it at a certain rate. Again, does this line remind you of something? It looks like that. It looks like that coronavirus curve right when the the virus hit. And look at this here. Now, after about 2 weeks, this is after one dose, guys. And after one dose of the vaccine, you have very little. I mean, we can even count them. After 3 weeks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 out of like 30,000 people. And you're down at such a low rate, less than 0.5% getting infected, as opposed to close to 2.5% of the population being infected. So the vaccine works extremely well. How does it compare to other vaccines? Well, here's the Pfizer's vaccine, about 95% effective based on that data you just saw. There's some that are better, some that are worse. It's touchy. The influenza vaccine, this is probably a little low, maybe 60%. I think most years it's at 60, not 45 or 50. But even in this range, we tend to think of the influenza vaccine as a pretty good vaccine, but it's way below 60. And here this is 95%. How safe? I'll just give you this is the table from the studies. These are the main side effects of these vaccines compared against what most people have experienced, which is an influenza vaccine. And I would say it is true that fever is higher, pain at the injection site, it's sore, makes your arm more sore than influenza virus vaccine. Fatigue, there is some fatigue that goes along for the first couple, 2-3 days, and some muscle pain and some headache, more so than influenza vaccine. However, these are mostly signs that you're having immune response to it, and the immune response is very good. When we look at serious adverse reactions, more serious than these, it's hard to even calculate the number because it's so small. At least one organization I have some knowledge of had over 20,000 vaccinations and 4 more serious ones. And that just meant they needed to wait and be observed more than the 15 minutes after the shot, but none were admitted to the hospital or anything like that. How are we doing in Wisconsin with the vaccine? This is taken from the state website as of today. We have vaccinated, look, around 13.7% of the population has had at least one dose of the vaccine. Most are getting the Moderna or Pfizer, but not all. And so they will have one more dose of it. We're doing a pretty good job vaccinating our 65 and over. We're at almost 45% of that population, which is great. This is the group most at risk. I'm just going to end with a few questions that I think people have. I'll address a couple of those, and then we'll be about at that 20-minute mark, and I'll ask answer some other questions you have. well, the reason I'm answering some of these are questions that I've been asked personally, that patients of mine have been asking, that friends or family have been asking, and have been in the media. From a gynecologist point of view, that's why this is right up at the top, an obstetrician. Will the vaccine make you sterile or unable to have children? The answer is, I think, a pretty clear no. That's the American Society of Reproductive Medicine has given a statement about that. Again, there's no difference to the immune response from the vaccine versus the virus. And we have not seen, we've had at least enough experience with the virus for the last year or more that we haven't seen any decreased pregnancy rates from that. Can you take the vaccine if you're pregnant and or breastfeeding? So every professional organization in the world, including the WHO, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, agree that the technology behind this seems to have no concern for transmission to baby or any harm with a pregnancy or while you're breastfeeding. There's no known harm in getting the vaccine while you're pregnant or breastfeeding, and we should not withhold it. Should all pregnant women get it? Not really sure. There's pluses and minuses, and it's up to each person depending on their situation. If there's a woman who's in her 35th week of pregnancy and she works from home and has no contact and no risk, then maybe she would decide no. Another woman early in her pregnancy who works caring for elderly patients in a nursing home, she may decide to. Does the vaccine use fetal tissue? Here is a chart that was shared with me by this group, the Charlotte Loiser Institute. This was recommended to me from the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetrician Gynecologists, a group I'm a part of. And certainly we want to take these issues seriously. Here's just a quick, easy red and green, yes and no. The AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson do use abortion-derived cell lines, and I'm going to explain what that means in their manufacturing process and vaccine creation. These others do not, including Pfizer and Moderna. Almost all use them in some form of lab testing. I'm just going to click here. I'm going to get us off of this real quick. So just to take us through, what does it mean if they're using cell lines from aborted tissue? What is a fetal cell line? If a cell is taken from aborted baby, maybe kidney tissue, it's grown in a lab, and these cells can live basically forever, and they can be tested and used for testing on a variety of things. Fetal cell lines have been used to grow viruses and to create inactive viruses for vaccines for a long time. Most of these historical fetal cell lines were derived in the 60s and 70s. And it is true that these cell lines were used to create such vaccines for rubella, hepatitis A, and rabies. There are some others, and they show the numbers here, that have been used in the creation of some vaccines, and some companies do use that for testing. Any vaccine that relies on these historical cell lines would not require new abortions. These are, and again, don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. I'm not excusing this or suggesting this is okay. But when we talk about the cell lines that are being used, these are being used from babies that were aborted many, many years ago, and those cells are still living. Are fetal cell lines necessary for vaccines? Not necessarily. They can use other non-human cells, and their vaccines can be ethically developed and not to use these cells, and to use cells from other animals or yeast or eggs. This just goes back through that same, these Moderna and Pfizer, the mRNA, none of the fetal cells were used. In some of these others, it's a different vaccine type, and some of the abortion-derived cell lines were used. This is a link in my slide set if you want to use it, or go right to this for more information. I'm going to go back to here. Can I get the vaccine if I've already had COVID? So yes, the CDC has a great website here, and they have some response about that. You want to make sure you're at least clear from the main disease. We think that the immune response from having COVID, having the virus, if you saw that slide early on, tends to diminish over time. So you should have the vaccine to give you that more long-lasting immune response. Does the vaccine alter my DNA? The short answer is no. If you saw where mRNA works, it's not in the nucleus. mRNA goes, it doesn't go that way. mRNA does not go and ingrain itself into the DNA. mRNA is the messenger RNA that comes from the DNA out to the ribosomes. So when your body takes inside a cell the messenger RNA is programmed to go to the protein factory of the ribosome. It doesn't go anywhere else. Why should young people get the vaccine? Back to that herd immunity. So if I say I'm not much at risk, but I can still get, I'm going to show you this. No, there we go. Can I still spread the disease if I get a vaccine? If after I got the vaccine? You know what? Let me ask. Sorry. Let me answer this question first and then go to the why should I get it? Can I still spread the disease if I get the vaccine? We're not, this is not my slide, so these comments here are not mine, but this is basically a person who has COVID, who has the virus. They have mild symptoms. Maybe they go out in public. They think they're not worried about it. They're going to go out in public. This person had the vaccine. This person had the vaccine and does not get infected. It worked really well, and they get no infection. This person does not have the vaccine, and they get the COVID infection. The problem with COVID, I want to spend just a little bit of time on this for a second. The problem with COVID is I'm infectious for probably 48 hours before I have symptoms. So it's this time from being infectious to here that I'm spreading it all over the world because I don't know that I'm even sick. This is one of the things that have made COVID very difficult because you're able to spread it before you have symptoms. This is the 14-day quarantine they're talking about. You're probably not infectious maybe after 10, but 14 is kind of taking it into all in consideration, so we're not spreading it. If you've been vaccinated, you still might be infectious, but it's most likely going to be much less. So you probably won't get any symptoms, but you could still be infectious for a shorter period of time. So vaccine is still helpful. We think maybe you can still spread it. The risk is much lower than if you've not been vaccinated, but at least at present time, this is still possible. And there's a lot of people out there who are still susceptible. So would still wear a mask and practice all of our other risk-averse behaviors, social distancing, not gathering, etc., even if you've been vaccinated to prevent this. Why should young people get the vaccine? Back to the, I answered them out of order, back to the herd immunity. We need more people so they can't send it to the next, to the next, to the next. Grandpa is protected if he never gets in contact with it because grandson and grandkids don't have it. Will life ever be normal again? When will it be normal? Will it be normal? I don't know what normal is, I guess, anymore. And when will it be normal? This is one. You saw the other graph that I showed you for herd immunity. Here's another one that someone shared with me. If we started vaccinations around January 2021, end of 2020, really, and we tried to get the high priority groups first, healthcare workers, over 65, we're trying to get to about 144 million people vaccinated. That's quite a lot of folks. That's a big lift. We hope to be there by summer. Herd immunity is going to be everyone else. And if we can close that gap and get to the 70% of the population, we're going to be much, much better. When will that be? These are just guesses in all humility. Late summer, early October. Let's say you're not an optimistic person and you're kind of down on how the vaccines have been going, although I think we're doing great jobs. Okay, fall, move this to fall or early winter, but hopefully we're going to hit this herd immunity in the near future. All right, that's about as much as most people can listen, I think. This talk will be available on the church website. I'm available to speak to other groups, other churches if you'd like, and who can argue with the baby, huh? Okay. Question time. Any questions for any folks?
Hey. Matt, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I just stopped for gas. I'm driving today. Okay, so like the Moderna, I understand that the MOD is modified and ERNA is RNA. So when you inject with it modifies your RNA, would that be a problem for people who are at the reproductive state of their life? Could it possibly cause birth defects? And then the second part of that question is, do all vaccinations modify your RNA?
Yeah. So for folks on the call who don't know Becky, that's my sister-in-law. Hi, Becky. The question is a reasonable question. The vaccine technology, not all vaccines use messenger RNA or use the RNA portion of this. Again, some vaccines, if we go back through, all the different history, some were just shooting the direct virus into people. Some were chewing up the virus and giving you pieces of the virus. Some were giving you just those growing the proteins of the virus shell out of the body and then just giving you the protein shell. HPV vaccine is a good example of that. There's no virus, it's just the virus coat. They inject you with the virus coat. Your body makes antibodies against that virus coat. The difference in this technology is instead of those proteins being made outside of your body, the messenger RNA, we can manipulate the messenger RNA to give the instructions to your own body to make that protein. So in the coronavirus, they talk about the spike protein. So instead of making the spike protein in the lab and giving you that protein so that your body reacts against it when it sees the real thing, we can give just the snippet of information that tells your protein factories, your ribosomes, to make the spike protein, not the virus, just the spike protein. So all that messenger mRNA does is go to a ribosome. It attaches the ribosome. The ribosome makes a spike protein. Then what happens to that messenger mRNA? What happens to all of it? It just dissolves and goes away. Your body just breaks it back down into those normal components of all messenger RNA that's working all day long. It just slides in beside all the rest of it. And so now your body makes that protein, and your body says, hey, that's a new protein. We've never seen that before. We're going to generate an immune response to that. You generate the immune response, and now you can fight off the virus when you see the real virus. But the nice thing about this is, I believe the technology, it doesn't go into the nucleus. It can't interact with your DNA. It's only floating around in the cytoplasm where the rest of the mRNA is, and it does its job and it gets out of the way. So it should not cause any long-term effects. It shouldn't cause any birth defects. It shouldn't do anything. It's really targeted just to do that one task. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, no, it does answer that. I guess I have a lingering fear of, and you addressed the reason why it was produced so quickly. That does make sense to me. I guess I have a lingering fear of, okay, yeah, but let's not be the guinea pigs if something does go wrong in the future. But I hear what you're saying. I do. It's a little scary with unknowns. Sure. Short amount of time on the market, just to be perfectly honest with you.
Sure. And a lot of people do that. All I would point out is we've got the known of the coronavirus. It's there. We understand what the risk is. Even for a lot of people, the risk is low. It's a known risk. We can kind of quantify it. It is low, but it's real. And especially in the older population, we're really trying to protect mostly them. It can affect other people. Yeah. The effects, yes, we don't know what the long-term effects of the vaccine are, but at least we know what the short-term effects of the virus are, and they're not good. And it's going to be hard to wait for the long-term effects of the virus, of the vaccine, because how long would that be? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Especially if we're talking about reproductive issues. However, RNA vaccines, even though they've not been used, have been studied and thought of. This is not a new idea. This has been going on for 5 to 10 years, this vaccine development. And one of the reasons they really looked at messenger RNA is because it's very targeted for that protein. They know where it's going to be. They know where it's going to live. This is I don't want to say the pinnacle of vaccine development, but vaccine development has been improving and improving and improving. So This is the next level of improvement in vaccine development. So.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to put my video away again. Thanks.
Pastor, did you have any on the chat, or do other people have questions?
Haven't had any questions come in on the chat. Some comments saying that you've done a good job, and encouraging people to, continue to wear their masks, get their vaccine, and keep their distance for now.
So I have
Bob
heard.
Jenkins was commenting just on the, you were saying earlier, the knownness of the disease versus the unknown long-termness of the vaccination. And he was just commenting because he actually works with COVID patients, that this has been quite the disease for people to take on. And so just the severity of what it causes, I think, sort of highlights the reasons why they were able to so quickly pour so much energy into getting this testing done in a hurry, because they really wanted to make sure they could help people out quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would reiterate that just about the vaccine development, and I think, I mean, a different way to think of it maybe is instead of, hey, the vaccine was developed fast, it could have been shoddily done, perhaps. Another way to think of it is, wow, the entire world stopped and did this.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, the entire world stopped and focused all of their attention on coronavirus. Yeah. And this is what the entire world's attention can do in a short amount of time. So, yeah. I mean, not to be too, I mean, it's really, in some sense, it's miraculous. And we are more connected as a world. Certainly a lot was driven by the United States, but that BioNTech is a German and German and American company together that partnered together. I don't think they're actually even they're not in the same company. They just went together to develop this vaccine.
Yeah.
So you saw a lot of people work, again, stopping everything they're doing and focusing just on this. Yeah. I think that's why it went fast.
Lois, did you have a question? I see you weren't muted there for a second. Did you have a question?
Yes, kind of twofold. One, Matt, do you know anything about lingering effects of having had the virus? Most people recover, but then do you have anything on what happens maybe after? We hear some people have heart attacks, some have strokes and that kind of thing. Do you know anything?
So a good question. I do think it is true that the virus, even if you look at the not to be morbid, but the death rate in people over 65 is still pretty low. So people over 65 who get it, most don't die, like 95% don't die, but some do. And for a lot of those, they've had the virus kind of stresses their body out. They had heart disease already. They had other things. Not everybody, but some. So yes, the virus itself, because you're put in such a state of illness, can exacerbate other problems, and that leads to perhaps death. I think what you're asking though is, if I had the virus and I'm well now, I got over it and it didn't kill me, I didn't go to the hospital, can I have lingering problems after that? Right. And the short answer is maybe, and I think we're learning more about that right now. I know there's one of my colleagues within Ascension who is opening some clinic time to just see people after COVID, and they are seeing a small amount of people having some lingering problems. Now, one of the difficulties is, anytime we look at this, when so many people have it, is it an association or a cause? Is it an association or a cause? Did COVID have it, or are we, because so many people had COVID, now my left arm hurts and I had COVID? Are the two related? Maybe yes, maybe no. I do think there is some feeling that there are a small number of people who have some kind of longer term, either neurologic, cardiology, some other issue with this. It's still being figured out. I think there is some suspicion of that, but on a really small scale.
Okay. Now, second question, did I understand correctly? Even though you are fully inoculated, you can still get COVID?
So well, first of all, I'll show you. Oh, fiddle. Hold on. I'll show you two things. Where did we go? So here's the data from the study. After about 2 weeks, these were the people who got vaccinated here. And yeah, they tested positive. Absolutely. So there were positive tests after you got the vaccine. It paled in comparison to the people who did not get the vaccine. Mm-hmm. So you can still get it. You can still get the virus. Now, this other graph I had kind of tried to show what happens to give a graphical representation. This is not, oh, come on. So this line is me getting the virus, getting it. I've been vaccinated. This is kind of the idea of even the flu vaccine, right? It's not perfect, but it's going to mute our ability to pass it to somebody else. I may not even have symptoms. I could test positive here, right? I could test positive. I may not even feel bad. And probably some of those people in that trial, they were being tested all the time, just tested positive without symptoms. But there is the potential for a few people who were vaccinated. Both of these people were in the vaccine group. One never got it, never were able to give it at all, but some people will be able to pass it on. Okay. Usually in that short amount of time when they came in contact with somebody else. Now, I don't know when I come in contact with someone else. They're asymptomatic. I may not know, but you still can. So this is the rationale for, at least at the present time, because we're not at herd immunity yet. We're not there. We're more like, here or somewhere in between here, where there are still plenty of people who are susceptible. So even if I've been vaccinated, I want to make sure have no chance of passing on to the next guy. So we would still recommend everything we've been doing until we get to that herd immunity status, so these people are protected.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help, Lois?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So Matt, when they say that it's 95% effective, is that what they mean, that only 5% of the people who receive the vaccine would stand even a chance of getting COVID again? Is that what the 95 means?
Yeah, that's kind of funny how they said that. I'll show you the They figure out the 94.1% efficacy. This is for the Pfizer one. So there were 14,000 people in each arm of the study in the placebo in the end. And where is the safety? Hold on. Efficacy. There were 196 cases of COVID-19. 11 were noted in the vaccine group, 185 in the placebo group. That led to that difference, 11 and 185, comes out to 94.1%. That's how they came up with that's how they determined vaccine efficacy. They take how many people got it versus how many people got it, and that percentage, as I understand it.
So when do you think, or do you have any thoughts on when you see mask mandates going away in light of the vaccine? Are we waiting for herd immunity for things like that? Or when do you see those sort of responses coming?
Yeah, beats me. That's a different question. But if we look, that's a tough question. I do think, let's just talk about vaccine hesitancy. Let's just say somebody is trying to consider, they're maybe not a no, but they're not yet. They're a not yetter. Okay, they're offered the vaccine right now, but they're not doing it now. They're going to wait. Okay, and those, so there are people who are just saying no for a variety of reasons. I'm never going to be vaccinated. I don't believe in vaccines, or I'm not going to get it, or for whatever reason, then that's fine. You're not going to get it. There are people who are not yet. I'm going to wait. I do think that as we move along, there is some point in the future where we're back to normal. There's no mask, there's no social distancing, we're through it. There may still be a yearly booster of the vaccine. There still may be cases of coronavirus, just like there's still cases of diphtheria, there's still cases of influenza every year, but it won't be at the rate, and it won't just plow through a population. We can mitigate it. There'll be an in-between time. And I think some of that in-between time will be characterized by, if you've had the vaccine, you can do this. If you haven't had the vaccine, you have to do it this way. I don't know what those are, and I wouldn't even guess right now. I mean, you could guess. I have no idea if I'm right or not. Flying on an airplane, going to certain hotels, going to the baseball game, being admitted for surgeries. I mean, right now, the only thing I've seen is the CDC has made a difference. They've made a discrimination on whether you've been vaccinated or not on your quarantine time. So if I was exposed to someone who had COVID and I had not been vaccinated, they're recommending you quarantine yourself for 14 days to make sure you don't develop symptoms. If you've been vaccinated, the CDC says you should quarantine for 0 days. You should go about your business. So I see more and more of those things happening, which may move people from the not yet. Practically, if it's a practical issue, they may say, well, I see the benefits of being vaccinated to myself. I want to go ahead and do that. However,
Any
if
other
you look at this
questions from
graph,
anyone before
if you
we
look at
move
this
on?
graph, I will just say one more thing about
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
timeline. If you look at this graph, maybe summer, if you look back at this graph, wherever it went, if you look back at this graph, I mean, they're talking about herd immunity. It all depends on what this number is, which is unknown. How many infections have there been? You could make an argument, and I've seen people make the argument, that that's why this is going down, that we've already hit that. What behavior changed in our society from September to March? I don't know that any did. I mean, did people do more or less masking or social distancing during this time? I maybe a little, but not significantly. So why are we heading down? I don't know. That's at least one theory.
Any other questions for Dr. Matt?
Great.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt, for all of this. It's really great to have this information available. And as you mentioned, we will put this out on the church website. So if other folks you guys know wanted to be here but just couldn't be here for the live session, you can let them know that within a couple days here, it'll be out on the website and they can access it that way.
And I would also ask you, anybody who is listening, if because we are trying to take this message around to anybody who wants to listen. If you have another group that wants to hear it, great. If there was something I didn't address, you would rather have me address, let me know. If there was something that I could have addressed in a different way, or it was confusing, or blah, 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 any feedback, you can always email me. So thank you.